have a side bet with the Montana coalition that New Hampshire is going to end repeal first, so please make that possible. You know, the New Hampshire legislature is a remarkable institution because it's people like you, people like me, who sit in it, who listen to arguments, who decide important issues. It's a citizen legislature, and it's a fascinating place to be. And for the last decade at least, the heart of the abolition movement in the New Hampshire legislature, in the state of New Hampshire, and really throughout this country and the world, has been Representative Renny Cushing. And I am so proud to say that he is my friend, that he's a member of our board, and he is working his little tail off this year to put together a coalition to bring a bill to the legislature that is going to go all the way. And Renny, if you would like to come up, where are you, Renny? And Renny's going to tell you about the bill and about the process and about what's going to be happening in this legislative session.
Thank you, Barbara. There's that old saying, you can always tell a New Hampshire legislator, you just can't tell them much. I just want to acknowledge and recognize a couple of people because Bishop Pilavassi is here in the back, and he has been an incredible ally and force for the repeal of the death penalty, and we can't say enough for his leadership within the diocese and in this movement. And there are a couple of, current and former elected officials I want to recognize. I want to recognize former Councilor Dudley, and from Durham, former County Attorney Lincoln Soldati, current State Rep Ken Grossman, and you're going to hear from Senator Cataldo and Representative Zabrowski afterwards, so they'll introduce themselves. We give the Badger Award out tonight, and it's interesting to note that Governor Badger was the first person to ask the state legislature to abolish the death penalty, and that was in 1834. And at the time, the movement to abolish the death penalty was known as the anti-gallows movement. So in a sense, this is a really kind of a continuation of we're the heir to the legacy of the anti-gallows movement as we assemble here tonight. And it's perhaps one of the important issues that have been discussed in the State House, have been discussed in our houses, in our homes, and in our society for a couple centuries. I'm not unmindful, though, of the fact that in New Hampshire and the United States, in the year 2013, we have a discussion about the death penalty, not because of apostasy, not because of horse stealing. We only have the death penalty for one reason, and that's because people are murdered. It's about a penalty that we reserve to take the life of someone who takes the life of somebody else. And there's a kind of a widely held belief in our society that assumes that everybody who'd had a family member murdered wants to see the death penalty, that they need it in order to get, closure or healing. And, as a consequence, our elected officials are under almost a moral obligation to provide this execution solution to victims' pain. I stand before you because, as Barbara Kesher knows, because my father was murdered in June of 1988, and Barbara Kesher was the prosecutor who brought my father's killers to justice, and that's something that I feel a bond. She's one of my heroes, so it's always good to follow her. But I'm somebody who doesn't fit the paradigm. There are lots of people that don't fit the paradigm. We're just neither cyclists or saints. We're just people who have had the worst thing you could possibly imagine happen, and kind of muddled through it and come to conclude that a ritual killing by public employees isn't going to do anything to bring our loved ones back. It's just going to kind of replicate the kind of pain that, or the kind of violence that brought us to pain in the first place. But I just want to tell you just a quick story. I didn't think about the death penalty after my dad was murdered because I was too busy trying to figure out, what are we going to do with the empty chair at the kitchen table? Or what are we going to do about all this emptiness in our heart? But a little while after my father's killers were arrested, I was in a corner grocery store, and an old family friend came up to me and said, Renny, I hope they fry the person. He didn't use the word person, but I hope they fry those who killed your father so that you and your mother can get some peace and your family can get some peace. And I didn't know what to say because, I know this guy my whole life, and I know he's trying to give me a little bit of comfort, but I just couldn't respond at that moment. But what I realized is that this is a man who'd known me my whole life and knew that before my father was murdered, I'd opposed the death penalty. Not because I'd ever given it a great amount of thought, but I just opposed the death penalty because that's part of the code that I wanted to live by. In part was inspired by being raised in the Catholic faith tradition, but also because when I became, a conscious being, I decided that I didn't want to see people killed. And I thought about what he said to me because he was trying to give me comfort. I realized that. But when I realized he was trying to give me comfort, I thought about it and I said, he presumes that because my father had been murdered, I support the death penalty now. And, I realized that if I did that, that would only kind of give him more power to murder, active murder, because not only would my father be taken from me, but so too would my values, and so too with the values that my father lived by. And I think it's the same for all of us as a society, as for individuals. We let those who kill turn us to killers, and really violence and evil trumps, and we're much the worse for it. This legislature, New Hampshire has not, had the death penalty, has not used the death penalty since 1939. But we've had a vigorous debate about it. And there are many reasons why people come to oppose the death penalty. In many ways, it's one of the most difficult public policy issues that you can wrestle with. And ultimately, it comes down to different reasons why people think it shouldn't be a good public policy. It transcends, I think, classic political labels, classic political, categorizations. And what we are trying to do in the New Hampshire legislature is to build a broad-based coalition of people who will, represent all aspects of our society, all aspects of the political process. And I'm, pleased that two of them are going to speak. Representative Sobrowski, and Senator Talbot. But what we want to do is we're in an interesting political moment. Last election was the first time in recent times where there were two candidates for governor who opposed the death penalty. Overland Montaigne and Maggie Hassan. And in a way, that speaks a lot about where the state of New Hampshire has been. A decade ago, the legislature, Republican-controlled legislature, abolished the death penalty, and the Democratic governor vetoed that. We're trying to revisit some of that. We spent a year and a half under the leadership of Justice Murphy looking at the death penalty and seeing how it really doesn't work. But what we want to do is to have, this is an exciting campaign. We want to have people who are here mobilized to support those lawmakers who are going to, have the repeal bill, and to contact, those who are not ready to to support that position, to engage in dialogue, because this is one of those issues that you really have to talk to people about. It's not simple. It doesn't. There's a slogan, but it doesn't doesn't fit well on a bumper sticker. But what I urge, and I hope everyone here will do, is participate in the work of the New Hampshire Coalition, and help us as we try to build a broad-based, both inside and outside strategy, if you will, to help move the legislature toward repeal. And we know that the governor has said that she will sign a repeal bill. I probably talked enough because I want others to do it, but it's going to happen. I feel very confident. We have a good, you know, as I said, a good cross-section both in the House and work in the Senate of people who will support repeal. And I just, when I think about my colleagues that I have conversations with all the time, and you know, people change on this. People change. I remember one thing that Nelson Mandela said when he was asked, you know, here's a guy, Nelson Mandela, he knows about the death penalty, he faced it at one time, did all this time in jail, and went out and, you know, didn't look back really. But he was asked, well, what do you think about people, political leaders who support capital punishment? You know, what do you think about people who support the death penalty? And, you know, in this kind of wise way, he said, well, you know, those political leaders who support capital punishment just haven't fully evolved. And so I think what our work is to help ourselves and to help our political leaders and help our society to evolve to the point where we realize that the death penalty it's not a criminal justice sanction, it's a human rights violation, and it's something that we in New Hampshire and the rest of the world can live without. Thank you.